Great. We are going to charge right ahead, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are working with some critical mass here on the attendee list, so I'm going to just get started with some housekeeping items. So please note this will be a bilingual space, and we have live interpretation support available for the webinar today. To access that, there should be a diagram on your screen where you can go to the bottom of the Zoom panel here and click interpretation and select your language of preference. So you can go ahead and take a moment to do that now. A couple other housekeeping items. We are going to be using the Q&A function to gather your questions. So please use that to submit questions to the panelists. As always, we want to have a kind and respectful place. Please keep that in mind for our engagement today. We are also recording this webinar, which will be made available later on, so you can keep that in mind as well. And should you have any technical difficulties, please use the chat function to chat my colleague Justin, who is Kitchen Table Advisor's host on the Zoom here today. Jumping into kind of the content and what we hope to see today, I see many friends and collaborators on the webinar here, but for those who might not be as familiar, I'd like to just give a quick introduction to Kitchen Table Advisors. We're a nonprofit supporting the long-term economic viability of small, sustainable farmers and ranchers in Northern and Central California. We work at both the individual and institutional levels through two programs that prioritize folks from marginalized communities. Our one-on-one bilingual business advising program offers personalized support to farmers and ranchers, while our ecosystem building program incubates collaborative projects that remove marketplace barriers around land, capital, and markets. Guiding our work is our vision for a more equitable and resilient farmer and rancher-led food system. And we're guided by our vision, one that has regenerative farmers and ranchers who are thriving leaders of a vibrant community-based economy that is rooted in the equitable distribution of power and resources. So that's who we are today. Just to give a brief overview of the agenda and what we're getting into for our time this afternoon. A few months back, KTA launched its Climate Resiliency blog series, really to provide a deeper picture of the climate crises facing Northern and Central California, the direct impact on clients and businesses within our client community, and the enduring resilience our clients reflect in adapting and rebuilding. This webinar is the first of a three-part series that will continue into this fall. So during the webinar today, you'll hear about the impacts of a series of atmospheric rivers that swept across Northern and Central California this past winter, as well as how climate change is impacting communities more broadly. For today, we'll spend about 35 minutes in a facilitated conversation with our panelists and have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A before wrapping up our time together. As a reminder, if you have any questions throughout this conversation, please use the Q&A function to submit those to us, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can at the end of our time together. So introducing our panelists, we have Tania Zuñiga, who is a senior business advisor with Kitchen Table Advisors based in Salinas. Joining Tania, we'll have KTA client Nancy Nuñez, who is the farm owner of Picoso Farm that is based in Watsonville, California. And lastly, we'll have Laura Murphy, who is a soil scientist with the Resource Conservation District in Monterey County, also based in Salinas. So I'm going to have my panelists join me today, and we will kick off our conversation. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Liz. I know Tania and Nancy are there somewhere.
Okay, we'll just give them a minute to join here, and hopefully you'll be able to see them on your screen.
Hola, Mayra. Gracias por el saludo.
Está prendida.
We could hear you, Tania.
Ok, parece que está conectándose.
Tania's camera is
We
connecting.
can hear you, and maybe we'll just jump in and
Yeah.
hope the video comes through, but we can't see your face right now. But we know you're there on the screen. Ah, ahí están. Hi. Great. Nancy, I wanted to start off with you wondering if you could share the story of your farm. Why do you farm and what do you sell? And if you could tell us where you're based as well.
Sí, claro que sí. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Nancy
Yes, of
Núñez.
course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is
Empezamos a
Nancy
Picoso
Nuñez.
Farm
We started Picoso Farms approximately in 2019. We are farmers because we like to grow. Since I was very young, I grew up around my parents that were farmers. My current partner loves to grow and produce products. We have our dream. We want to have our own home, and we know that working very hard, we'll be able to achieve that. We sell a variety of vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, potatoes, etc. Most of our products are sold at farmers markets, which are located in Napa on Tuesdays and Saturdays. We also go on Sundays to Martinez and Moraga. We are here. We know that working very hard we'll be able to achieve our dreams, and we love to grow and bring fresh products to our communities. Thank you.
Nancy. Was wondering too, Nancy, if you could share how California's changing climate and the recent winter storms affected you and your business.
Sí, claro que sí.
Yes, of course. In 2023, we were affected by the flooding in January, but the one that hit us the worst was the one in March. It was very hard for us to recover from the losses, but thanks to the support of KTA, we were able to get support from our community around us. We lost approximately 2 acres of our vegetable production. It was very sad because we were ready to harvest. However, when the flooding came in, it was all underwater. And when the water subsided, none of the product was salvageable. We lost 6 months of crops. We only were able to sell 6 months of our work. We are slowly recovering with the support of KTA. And now we have a plan on what to do in case of emergency in the future, how to face the adversities that are completely out of our hands and they can show up at any moment. It was very difficult because we only got back our investment of our work for 6 months, and we are working with them to have a plan for any emergency. But this year, our harvests are very slow. Our crops are affected by the temperatures. It's not as warm as it should be. We are behind on our tomatoes, our zucchini, everything that will be seasonal due to climate change and how it's affecting how our products grow and when they're ready for harvest. So we're behind economically as well.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. Tania, I wanted to hear from you as well how California's changing climate and the recent storms affected your work advising small farms, and how did you work with clients to overcome the damage and plan for the future?
El trabajo nuestro como
Our
consultores de negocio
job
ha
as
cambiado
business
bastante
advisors
en
has
los
changed
últimos 4
drastically
años.
in the
Así que,
past 4 to 5 years.
el hecho de estar
The
viendo,
fact that we
o pasando
are
periodos de sequía y
experiencing
luego,
drought
totalmente
periods,
el problema, ¿no? Incrementándose con los incendios,
added
y ahora
to the
el tema de las
fires,
tormentas,
and lastly, the
ha
storms.
cambiado bastante
It has changed things
la estructura de trabajo que tenemos con cada uno de
drastically
los
in our
clientes
working
que apoyamos.
structure with every
Nosotros
single one of our
ahora ponemos
clients.
bastante énfasis
Right now,
en
we
realmente desarrollar
highlight
planes
developing
de mitigación de riesgos,
risk
que era
mitigation
algo que
plans,
antes
which is
de
something
repente
that
estaba dentro del paquete
was
de trabajo que nosotros
part
hacíamos con
of
cada
the work
cliente,
that we were doing with every single one of our
y de
clients.
repente era algo que no le
And
poníamos mucho enfoque
it
o no
was
le
something that
poníamos
maybe
mucho
was not
tiempo, pero
the
ahora se convierte en una prioridad.
central focus, but now it has become a
Nosotros en estas últimas
priority.
tormentas, especialmente nuestra región
Throughout
fue
the
afectada
last
por
storms,
tormentas,
our
inundaciones.
region was affected by
Nuestros
storms, by
agricultores, como
floodings.
Nancy,
Farmers such
perdieron
as
no
Nancy
solamente
lost not
equipo de
only
trabajo, no solamente, en
equipment,
este caso, los
not
cultivos de
only
riego,
their
no solamente
crops,
materiales de
not
empaque,
only
no
their
solamente se
packaging
les dañó
materials,
mucho del equipo que tenían ahí de refrigeración muchas veces,
their
sino
refrigeration
también
systems,
bienes
but also
personales.
their
Estamos hablando
personal
de
belongings.
familias
We're
que
talking
muchas
about
veces
families that
los
many a
lugares donde
times,
rentan tierra
the
también
areas where
tienen
they
bienes
lease
personales
the
porque
land, they
prácticamente
keep their
están
personal
24
belongings
horas del día
because they are
en
there
the farm. Y
24
nosotros
hours a day
también
at the
para eso, para
farm.
poder compartir ese
And
trabajo que hacen
they
del
do
negocio
this so they
con la
can
familia.
share this
Entonces,
family business with their family time.
nosotros tuvimos que
We
desarrollar
had to
planes
develop
de respuesta a la emergencia,
emergency response
tratando
plans
de conectar a
to
nuestros
try
farmers
and get our
regionales con
farmers
programas
linked with
financieros de ayuda, ya sea a
financial
nivel
support
federal o a
programs,
nivel
let it be
estatal,
at the federal
entendiendo
level,
también
state
que
level.
muchos por
Also
temas
understanding that many
de
of them,
estatus
due
migratorio,
to
no podían
immigration
acceder
status,
rápidamente
could not
a
have
estos
easy access
recursos
to any of those
y
resources.
usar mucho tiempo, invertir
And
mucho
they
tiempo
had
en
to invest
encontrar
lots of
fondos
time trying
privados
to
que
find
puedan
private
apoyar
funds
a estas
that could
comunidades que no
support
estaban siendo
our communities,
atendidas de
that
la
were
manera que
not
tenían
getting
que ser
the
atendidas,
support the way they needed it,
entendiendo que estábamos pasando por una
understanding
emergencia.
that we were going
El
through an
trabajo
emergency.
también ahora,
Our work
aparte de enfocarnos
nowadays, not
en
only do
desarrollar
we
planes de
focus on
respuesta,
developing
también es
response plans,
desarrollar planes de
we are
recuperación,
also
¿no es cierto?
developing
Ahora estamos en la fase de
recuperation
recuperación
plans.
y
Now we
ahora
are trying to
entender
recover.
por qué es importante
We are
tener
trying
estos
to
fondos de emergencia
understand why it is
disponibles. Y
important
es
to have
fácil
this
decirlo, ¿no?
emergency funds available. It's
Idealmente
easy to
sería
say,
bueno
of
que
course,
cada uno tuviera
ideally,
un fondo de
each farmer should
emergencia,
have
pero
an
la realidad
emergency
es que
fund. But the
con los
reality of
cambios
things
climáticos por los
is
que
with
estamos
climate
pasando, con la
change,
inflación,
with
con las
inflation,
disrupciones que vemos en el
with the
mercado, es
disruptions that
difícil.
we observe in the market, this is very
Pasamos
complicated.
al año y medio después de las tormentas
It's
y
been
los
a year and a
cultivos como
half
Nancy no
since
se
the
pueden
storms,
recuperar.
and farmers such as Nancy
Estamos
have not
hablando de
fully recovered
agricultores
yet.
como ya lo
We're
han
talking about
hecho,
farmers like
inclusive
Nancy
este
already
año
shared, even
2024,
this year,
cuando ellos
2024,
pensaban que iban a
when they were
poder volver a
thinking
tener
they
un
will
año
be able to have
normal, entre
a
comillas,
quote unquote
tener
normal
un cash
year
flow saludable
and
como
have a
lo
healthy
tenían
cash
planeado,
flow normal
no
like they
se
were
está dando
expecting,
porque
they're not
los
seeing
cambios
that
que existen en el
because
clima no le están
the climate
permitiendo a agricultores como
changes
Nancy
are
a
not allowing farmers
cosechar
such as
cuando tenían
Nancy
planeado
to
cosechar.
harvest
Y
where
con
they were
eso
planning to
tienen un impacto
harvest,
negativo
and
en
that
sus cash
creates a
flows.
negative
Y el problema es que
impact on their
muchos farmers,
cash
porque no
flow.
tienen
And many
historial de
of them,
crédito
since
o
they
de
don't have
repente
a
no
good credit
tienen o no cumplen
history,
con la
or they
el
don't
criterio,
have
¿no? de los bancos
the
convencionales o
criteria to
algunos
get a loan from
CDFIs
conventional
que no
banks
tienen
or
acceso a capital
CDFIs, they don't
y
have capital
simplemente
access.
recurren
And
lamentablemente
sadly, they
a modelos de préstamo extractivo
go
donde les
to
cobran intereses del
loans that
28
are
al 30%,
predatory and
32%.
their interest rates is
Entonces la
28,
idea
35%.
de Kitchen Table Advisors es no
The
solamente
idea
ayudarlos con
that we have at
estamos
KTA
enfocándonos
is
mucho
not
en
only
cómo
to help
desarrollar planes de
farmers
respuesta, de
develop
recuperación y de
response and
prevención. Es
recovery
algo que
plans
hacemos
as well
mucho
as
con el
prevention,
RCD.
which is
Laura
something that we
probablemente va a poder
do
hablar más
a
de
lot
eso
with
después.
RCD. Laura will be
Es
able to share
también
about this,
desarrollar
but we're also talking about
modelos en los que se
developing
puede facilitar
models
el
in
acceso a
which
capital a agricultores y
capital
ganaderos como ellos.
access can be
Entonces tenemos
easier for
enfoques en Kitchen Table
farmers
Advisors
such as Nancy.
como el Fondo Solidario.
We have,
El
for
Fondo Solidario
example,
es un
Fondo Solidario at
fondo
KTA,
comunitario
which is a
donde son los
community
agricultores
fund
los que tienen el
where
poder de decidir qué
farmers
hacer con
have
ese
the
dinero, con ese fondo.
decision-making
Ahorita estamos
power
en un
to decide
piloto
what happens
y
to
la
the
idea es
funds.
justamente
We are
que ese
running our
modelo sirva de
pilot, and the
ejemplo
idea
para
is
que
for
otras
this
organizaciones,
model
otras
to be
comunidades
an
se
example for
organicen y
other
puedan
communities,
desarrollar
other
planes similares.
organizations to be able to have this
Entonces,
type of community
eso
funds.
ha sido más o menos como el trabajo
That
que ha
is
ido
more or less
desenvolviendo.
how
Como han podido escuchar, ¿no es cierto?
as
En los
you
últimos
have heard,
4 o 3 años
in the past
ha
3,
ido
4
de alguna
years,
manera
um,
cambiando, ¿no?
we've seen making changes.
en pro de la comunidad con la cual trabajamos.
to be able to
Thank
support
you,
our
Tania.
community.
Yeah, it's a lot of work and a lot of partners to kind of all address the gaps and the barriers and the very real reality of climate change now. I'm wondering, I know, Laura, we're going to get to you to speak more, but Tania, could you speak a little bit to how you've worked with the RCD to build resilience for client farms and ranches?
Sí, definitivamente. La
Definitely,
colaboración que tenemos con el RCD es una
collaboration with
colaboración que
RCD
viene de varios años y en estos
has
últimos
been
2 años, especialmente
longstanding
con
in the
el tema
past 2 years when
las
it comes
inundaciones,
to
¿no es cierto? Y el
flooding
impacto del
and
cambio climático, que
the
cada vez es
impact of
más
climate
presente en
change
nuestra
that
comunidad
is
agrícola.
more
Nosotros
and more present
trabajamos
in our
desde
community. We
colaborar
work
en
from
identificar
identifying
programas de ayuda financiera a agricultores
financial
para
support
mitigar los
programs
riesgos
for
del cambio
farmers to
climático, ¿no es
mitigate
cierto?
climate change
Como
risks,
así también
such
colaborar
as
en, una vez identificados estos programas,
and
ayudar a los
also,
agricultores a que
collaborating once we have
facilitamos el
identified
acceso de los agricultores con quienes
those
trabajamos a acceder a esos recursos
risks, then being able to have the
para no
farmer
tener
have
todavía ser muy
access to those
limitados. Debería
resources,
existir
which in
una
my
mayor
opinion
inyección
are
de
very
fondos
limited.
a nivel
There should
estatal y
be
a nivel
a
federal
bigger
para el
investment
agricultor
of
hispanohablante.
funds to help
De
farmers
repente
like
facilitar el
Nancy
acceso a
from
identificación de
having
estos
the
programas, al mismo
access
tiempo
to those
también de una manera
programs.
ya más
I
individual
also
o
think
uno
on an
tratamos
individual
de
level,
identificar cuáles son
we
los
try to
riesgos que
identify
existen dentro de la
the risks
infraestructura
that
de
are
operación
part of the
agrícola
infrastructure
de la cual
of
nosotros
each farm business that we
una vez
support.
identificados los
Once
riesgos,
we identify
desarrollamos
the
planes,
risks,
¿no?
we
Planes de
develop
prevención. Mucho
plans,
del trabajo que
prevention
se ha hecho
plans.
estos últimos años
Much of the work that we've been doing in the
relocar
past 2 years is
agricultores
trying
que
to
sabemos que están en
relocate
áreas
farmers
vulnerables,
that we know are in
relocarlos
areas that are
desde cero
prone to
empiezan.
flooding.
Todos sabemos que no es difícil
We know how
encontrar
hard
tierra.
it is to find
No
land
hemos podido
here in
relocar a todos.
California.
Un
We
ejemplo
haven't been
es
able to do it for everybody.
Nancy.
For
Pero ¿por
example,
qué? Porque
Nancy.
también
But
existe
why?
una
Because
evaluación en
we do
cuáles son
an
los pros y
assessment
los
of
contras
what
de
are the
relocar,
pros and
si es
cons
año
of
1, año 2 o año
relocating.
3, de
Let it be
repente
year
es más
1, 2, or
estratégico
3 of your
hacerlo.
farm business.
Pero en ese trabajo, RCD
Throughout our work,
apoya a los
RCD
agricultores
has been
en
supporting
hacer la
farmers
evaluación,
to do
entender si las
that
nuevas plotas de
assessment,
tierra
understanding if
son
the new plots of
son una
land
buena opción de
are a
acuerdo a
good
las
and
actividades
viable
agrícolas
option,
de
depending
cada
on the
operación
farm
de cada negocio.
activities that each farmer or each operation wants to do.
Thank you, Tania. Laura, wondering if you could share a little bit about what you've been seeing and how California's changing climate and the recent storms, how it affected your work at the RCD and what y'all are doing to kind of help build resiliency along these farmers.
Gracias, Liz. Sí, por supuesto.
Yes, of
Para
course.
empezar, nuestro trabajo
To
se centra
start,
en
our
ayudar a los agricultores
work
a crear
is
planes
focused on helping farmers to have their plans and their management systems to be efficient, and also to have access to funds to improve their conservation practices. The goal of our work has been to support the change in cycles that we have seen. We want to make sure that there's enough clean water, that there's enough resources for all living organisms, and obviously farming needs this type of resources. So we always try to help farmers to develop farm systems that are resilient to the available resources. But with climate change and the events, it has become a lot more urgent to make sure that farmers are ready for what can happen. What's interesting about our work, it's out in the field. But when the conditions of the fields are not accessible, then we are focusing on helping. For example, if the fields are flooded, if there's wildfires, and we can't make it to the farm during the flooding in 2023, we saw that the farmers that we work with were also unable to work. We saw a great need to connect farmers that are the most vulnerable with programs that could help them with insurance and other expenses to at least be able to benefit financially. I think that we have seen a new need towards climate resiliency and helping farm businesses whenever there's a climate event. Those programs could be very difficult. They take a lot of time, concentration, and perseverance when you're trying to apply and have access to those. And farmers sometimes lack that focus or patience. So we work together with them, for example, with KTA, to support the farmers and push the process along with every farmer that's trying to apply to those resources. We have had a switch in how we do our work and helping farmers to have access to the programs and trying to support them and filling out and turning in those applications.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that context and what you're seeing from the RCD. Going back to you, Tania, in your opinion, what is needed for small farmers and ranchers to continue building in resilience for the future?
Definitivamente hay dos
There is
grandes obstáculos.
two
En
main
mi
obstacles, in my
opinión,
opinion,
deben ser inmediatamente
that
atendidos.
need to
La
be
primera es
tended to
tener
immediately.
acceso a capital.
First is
Nuestras comunidades
access
no
to
van a
capital.
poder
Our
desarrollar
communities won't be able
planes
to
de
develop
contingencia o planes de
contingency
mitigación
plans
si
or
no hay
mitigation
capital o
plans
dinero para
if
sostener
there's
esos
no
planes.
funds to
Esa
make
es
those
una.
plans come to
Dos,
fruition. That's number
ya la
one.
emergencia estando
Secondly,
en
once
nosotros, ¿no? En nuestras
the
casas, ya estando
emergency
pasando por la
is
emergencia,
upon us,
lo
once
mismo,
we're
¿no? Los
facing it,
agricultores no tienen
our
capacidad de
farmers don't
responder
have
porque no tienen
the
capital.
ability
Entonces, la
to
necesidad de
respond
inyectar
because of lack
capital
of
a nuestras
funds.
comunidades
I see the
agrícolas
need to
debe ser prioritario.
inject
Y
capital
ese
to our
capital
ag
puede entrar
communities.
a
It has
través
to
de
be a
programas,
priority.
¿no es cierto? A
It
través
can
de
be
becas,
through
ya sean
programs,
manejados a nivel
scholarships.
estatal, por el
It could
USDA,
be
por
at state level to
CDFA o estatal por
CDFA or
USDA,
federal through the
o
USDA
también de manera privada.
or
Pero
privately as
necesitamos
well.
inyectar capital
We
en
need
nuestras
to
comunidades para que
inject
nuestros
capital to our
agricultores puedan
communities so that our
responder.
farmers can
Segundo,
properly
asegurar
respond.
el acceso a tierra
And we
para
also
los
need to
agricultores. Es algo que
ensure
muchas veces no
access
asociamos
to
con el tema
land.
de que
It's something that we
un
don't
resiliente, un agricultor como Nancy
associate
se puede
with
convertir
how
si
resilient
es
a
que no
farmer
tiene
such as
acceso
Nancy
a
could
tierra
become
segura.
if they don't
Este
have a
contrato,
secure access to land or to have a contract
solamente se renueva de año en
that
año, o es un
is
contrato
renewed
que no
yearly,
le da la seguridad a
or
ella
it gives
de
her
al
no
menos
security
¿no es cierto?
that at
Tener
least her
suficiente tiempo para tener
investment
un
will be
retorno,
safe, that she will
un
have enough
margen de
time to see a
ganancia
return
que
on her
ella
investment
planea tener
and
para
have
la
a
familia, para ofrecer
margin
calidad de
that
vida
she
a su
will need
familia y
to
así
be able to provide
mantener
for
el
her
negocio.
family
Entonces,
and keep the
bendecir el
business
capital
growing.
en
So
conjunto con
capital
acceso a tierra
injection
son los
along with
dos de
land
los
access
obstáculos más
are
grandes
two
que
of
nuestra
the
comunidad
main
tiene
obstacles that
para
our
volverse
community has
resiliente.
to be able to become
Entonces, para
resilient.
mí es
So
importante
for me,
que
it's very
organizaciones,
important that
comunidades,
organizations,
gobierno
communities,
local,
governments,
gobierno, ¿no es cierto? En general,
local and in
a
general,
a nivel más macro,
at a
realmente
macro
pongan más
level,
atención. Y yo creo que
pay
Laura
attention
y
to
yo
this.
y otras
I feel like
organizaciones hemos
Laura
visto que
and
sí,
I and
hay
other
ganas de
organizations have
poner
seen, yes,
más dinero,
that
hay
there is
ganas
the
de poner
desire
o
to
crear
bring
más
the funds
programas,
or create
pero de
more
nuevo,
programs,
todavía no vemos que eso
but
venga acompañado
we
de
haven't
dinero
seen
para que
this
exista un staff o
with
o staff
the
administrativo
the admin staff that can actually help the farmer to fill out those forms to understand if the program is a program that applies to their operation. Like Laura mentioned, sometimes the applications are very difficult to understand, to fill out, to bring in all the documents needed. The community is big, and those of us doing this work are very few. There's not an appropriate ratio to say with full confidence the funds are available, the programs exist, and all our clients, all our farmers, all the farmers in our community can access them. So those are two of the main things. And at a more individual level is talking about diversification, which is something that all farmers, most farmers that we work with understand. You need to diversify your marketing channels, what you produce, and not only to be resilient when it comes to the finances, but at the same time, making sure that the soil that you're working with, the resources that you're making use of, are part of your equation. And to do this, we appreciate the work that the RCD does because it complements with their knowledge the work that we do with developing their strategy, their planning, looking for resources, having access to those.
Thank you, Tania. Tania named a couple of resources for sure, but Laura, I'm wondering if you could share some of what the resources you recommend for other small farmers or even for the broader community that's here. What are the things that we should be aware of?
Honestly, it is very hard to just give you a list of funds or programs because things change.
Lo que es estable son los lugares de donde vienen, típicamente, si son federales.
We need to see where the funds come from. If it's federal, we have the USDA, the CDFA, and within those agencies, we have different departments and funds and programs, and they all change. It's like a jellyfish. It expands and it contracts. There's a lot available, then it's not. And they have different cycles. It depends on how the government is doing financially, then programs come and go throughout the year. So I will say having access to programs is about relationships. And I think it's very important for farmers to make sure that they are well connected and on a comprehensive level. And knowing someone at every place, every agency that can help them and keep in touch with them. For example, here in Monterey County, the resources start with the USDA, CDFA, the ag commissioners, the local RCDs in each county, more or less, there will be an RCD, and each one of them has their own programs, their own priorities, which are based on the region where they are located. And I think we also have programs available through CAF, through Farmlink, through other organizations that are supporting. But what's the most important is to find someone that you trust and keep in touch with that person from that organization to ensure that they keep you in mind when things become available to be able to support you. But that's why it's so important to keep in mind exactly what could you benefit from in your own specific situation. Do you need something to improve soil health, to make sure that you are using water efficiently, that you're not wasting water? Or because of the higher temperatures, each farm, the risks are a little bit different. So we need to keep in mind, what are the risks that I'm facing? And what are the steps that I could take to improve the conditions and have a very clear image of what I can do when those programs are available to take advantage of what would apply to your specific situation.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just the information and having different folks you can collaborate on and with. This is our final question, and it's for everybody, all three of you. So whoever wants to kind of tackle it first, please go ahead. What is needed for the resilience of the larger community? You know, I think with food systems, we're all connected, right? Folks that are providing at organizations providing support to farmers who are doing the work of growing the food, and folks who are consumers. What's your perspective on what's needed given the reality of climate change?
Cooperación, comunicación,
Communication, conservation,
confianza.
trust.
Tania, you're on mute.
Disculpen.
Uh,
Yo creo que,
sorry. I
conectividad,
believe
¿no?
connectivity,
Construir comunidad es bastante
building
importante. Muy
community is
relacionado a
very
lo que
important and
Laura,
related to what
recomienda a muchos de
Laura
los productores
recommends
ganaderos
for
en
many
nuestra
of the
comunidad.
farmers
Es, yo
and
creo que
ranchers in our
creo que Nancy puede
community.
hablar un poquito más de su
Nancy maybe can
experiencia,
share a little bit more about
los
her
daños
own
y las
experience,
últimas
but
tormentas,
Nancy in the past
recibió
storms,
bastante apoyo
she
de la
received
comunidad, de
plenty of
comunidades con las
support
cuales
from
trabaja ella
communities that she
a través
works
de sus
with
farmers markets.
throughout her
A
farmers
diferencia de
markets,
repente
through her
de
farmers
otros
markets, sorry,
agricultores que nosotros hemos
compared to
visto,
other farmers that we
que
have
tienen un
seen
modelo de operación
that have
de
a
mayoreo, pues no tienen
model
mayor
that sells
conexión
wholesale. They don't
con
have those types
comunidades,
of
con
connections with
vecindarios, con
communities,
gente
with
en general.
neighborhoods, with people
Entonces,
in general.
la
So
capacidad de
the
recibir
ability
de
to
apoyo, no
receive
solamente
support,
financiero, sino
not
moral,
only
es bastante
financial
importante.
support, but
Creo
moral
que
support, which is just
gracias a
as
Dios Nancy
important.
pudo
I think
recibirlo.
that thank God Nancy was able to
No sé si de
receive that.
repente quieres hablar un
Sí.
poquito
I don't know if
más.
maybe you want to
Sí, sí,
share a
claro.
little bit about this. Yes, of
Pues,
course.
como dice Tania, ¿verdad? A
Like
veces nosotros
Tania
como
is sharing,
agricultores
many
pequeños
times us
estamos
as
tan
small
enfocados en
farmers
trabajar la
focus
tierra,
in working
enfocados
the
en cosechar para poder
land and
seguir como
harvesting
familia,
to be
para
able
poder
to support our families,
sosteniéndonos económicamente.
to keep
Y luego nos
financially
pasa que
supporting
hay
ourselves,
gente
and
que
we
está ahí
don't
para
see
apoyarnos. El
beyond
día
that.
que llegó
We see that there's people
Chela
there
y
that are
Rosy,
able to help us.
la verdad
When
tuvimos
KTA
mucho
came to
tiempo
my
que yo
life,
sentí que no
it was
estaba sola, que
amazing
tenía
because
una
I felt like I
persona
wasn't by
apoyando,
myself. I had
a que
someone
me
support
abriera el camino, que
to
mira, ve acá, ve allá. Por ejemplo, cuando pasó
go
la
and seek
inundación,
support in different
para
places.
mí
When
fue
the
muy difícil
floodings
porque
took
la
place, it was
emergencia
very
llegó.
hard for
Eso
me because
pasó
the
muy
emergency was
rápido.
upon us. It
En ese
happened
tiempo,
overnight. At that
Henry
time,
me estaba
Henry
ayudando por
was
parte de
my
sus incentivos.
BA
Abrimos
at
un
KTA.
GoFundMe. La verdad
We
fue
opened a
impresionante la
GoFundMe, and I
ayuda de
was
la
so
comunidad
impressed by the
que
support
tuve.
from the
Yo nunca
community.
pensé que
I
fuera a
never
recibir tanto
thought that I
apoyo, pero
will get so
eso
much
me ayudó
support.
bastante
And
para
that
seguir
was very
con mi
helpful to
trasplante,
keep
para
buying
poder
my
seguir trabajando
transplants,
las tierras.
to keep
La
working
comunidad me
the
ayudó
land. The
muchísimo,
community
recibí
helped
mucho
me
apoyo de los
a lot.
farmers
I
markets
got
donde
tons of
trabajo,
support from the
tanto
farmers
de clientes
markets where I
como
was
gente que no conozco,
participating
que
from
estuvieron
clients
en
and
muy
people that were
buenas
complete
posiciones.
strangers.
Y como dijo
And they were
Tania,
there in my most difficult
yo pienso
times.
que algo que
Like
nos puede
Tania
ayudar
said,
mucho sería
something that will be very
el
helpful
obtener becas,
will
el
be to
obtener
get grants or
préstamos, ¿verdad?
scholarships,
Préstamos
loans
accesibles.
that
A
are
veces en el
accessible.
momento de la emergencia no
Sometimes
tenemos
when we're
para
going through
podernos
the
comprometer y
emergency, when we're
desgraciadamente para
facing the
eso es muy
problem,
difícil tener un
it's
fondo
been very
de
hard for me to
emergencia
have an emergency fund
porque pues es
because
difícil a veces como
it's
agricultores
hard
hay una
as a
familia que
farmer.
depende
We have
de
a
que pagar
family
el
to
trasplante, hay
support.
que
We need to buy our
pagar quizá uno de
transplants.
los
We need
empleados
to
para que nos
pay one
ayude.
or two employees
Entonces, si
to help
tuviéramos la
us with
oportunidad, que
the
yo sé que sí va a ser,
work.
¿verdad?
I know there
Organizaciones
is
que
some
nos
organizations out there or
dineros,
government that
pero a veces te piden muchos
lends money,
requisitos,
but
cosas que
sometimes the
necesitamos cumplir.
requirement lists are
Entonces, podemos
super
llamar a
long
la
and we
aplicación y
just
esperar un
don't
mes o 2 meses para
qualify. You
recibir
need
el
to turn in the
préstamo
application
cuando
and
en
you wait
realidad
a
la
month or two
emergencia está
when
ahí y
in
ya
reality
necesitamos el
the
apoyo.
emergency is right
Entonces,
now
bueno,
and we need the
yo en lo
support
personal sí
immediately.
me gustaría como que si
Personally,
existiera
I
esa
would like
posibilidad de ayudarnos
to
a sacar
have
un
that
préstamo por
possibility,
becas,
even if it's a
pero en el momento, ¿verdad?
loan
Que se nos
or
hiciera
a
mucho
grant
más fácil acceder al
to
capital para poder
make it
seguir
easier
trabajando.
for us to
Porque yo
access
sé que
capital
como
when we
dicen,
need it to be able to keep working.
trabajando duro y
We are very hardworking, and I know that can help us achieve our goals. But because of the climate change, because of flooding, it's been hard to recover. I know that the situation will not always be like this. We'll make progress, but I would like to have that additional support from the government at the state level, at the federal level, to have access to loans that are easy to access in a short period of time and not have to wait for a long time. But the community has been so helpful for us, not only to ask to come and buy product from us. Once they're at the market, they have different options and they come to us because they see that we were affected and they want to support us so that we can keep bringing fresh products to the community. I'm very thankful for the support that I got, not only from KTA, but from the community. I didn't think I would have that support, but it was very pleasantly surprising, and I'm very thankful.
Gracias, Nancy.
Bonito
Siento que
escuchar eso, Nancy. Quería también,
Thank you, Nancy. I wanted to say that it's also important to keep records of everything, detailed records of everything that you spend your money on, especially if we are going through a crisis or a climate change event, to be able to have access to government funds. They are going to need proof. They're going to need records. You need to have documentation that will help you access those resources once they become available.
ya totalmente de acuerdo. Y yo creo que
Yes, I fully
para mí
agree.
es importante, ¿no?
And
Que
I think for
exista
me,
ese
it's
apoyo
important
de
that the
proveedores a
support
nivel técnico
is
que puedan
available
ayudar a
for
desarrollar sistemas
technical support
y
providers
enseñar
that can
herramientas a
help
nuestra comunidad
develop systems and
cómo
teach the
realmente,
tools as to
entendiendo las
how
barreras del
to
lenguaje,
understanding
entendiendo
language
las arriba-
barriers,
acceso a
understanding
tecnología, entendiendo
technological
relaciones
barriers,
nacionales,
generational barriers,
desarrollar
to develop
una forma en
a
desarrollar
way,
sistemas y proveerles
develop a
herramientas para que ese
system and a
trabajo sea
program
mucho más
so that
amigable, ¿no? No quiero
is
decir
more
fácil porque no es
accessible.
fácil,
I'm not
pero
saying
que se
easier
les haga
because I
un
know it
poco
won't be
más
easy,
como una práctica
but
de negocio
making it
que
part of their
es algo
business
que siempre
practices.
recomendamos, ¿no? Pero
It's something that we
conocer
always
las
recommend. But like
realidades
Nancy
difíciles.
mentioned, sometimes it's just
Un
difficult.
negocio agrícola que
It's
tiene
a farm
solamente
business
al esposo y a la esposa
where it's maybe just husband and wife trying to
la
run
operación agrícola
the
o
daily
ganadera, y
operation
teniendo de
of the
repente
farm.
2, 3
And
trabajadores
then you
que
have
se
2 or
encargan de la
3
operación agrícola y
employees
ventas.
that are part of
No hay
the
mucho más capital muchas veces para pagar a un staff administrativo
farm.
que pueda ayudarlos a
And then we
ellos
need to pay
a
the
ordenar,
admin staff to
organizar,
help
a
us keep
mantener
everything
un
organized, well
rastro de
maintained,
todo este tipo de
to keep the
elementos.
traceability of
Entonces,
all our documentation and processes.
definitivamente yo creo de
So
que
definitely, I
es
believe
algo que
that
los agricultores pueden
it's something that
desarrollar, pero
farmers
para
can
eso hay una
develop,
curva de aprendizaje,
but
¿no?
there is a learning
No
curve.
solamente una curva de aprendizaje, sino también
And
un desarrollo de estrategias que les puedan permitir
developing
a ellos
our
llegar
strategies
a
so
esa
that
meta.
farmers can achieve
Cultivated
that
Advisors
goal.
muchas veces hacen
KTA
ese
many
trabajo,
a
nos
times
ayudan,
does that work
pero
or
de
help
nuevo, ¿no?
helps farmers, but at the same time,
Tenemos recursos limitados
we have
y la
limited
idea es
resources.
que, al igual que
And
la
the
RCD, ¿no?
idea, just like
Y al
RCD
igual que otras organizaciones
and
que
other
trabajan en nuestra
organizations that
región,
work in our
vemos gente
region,
como CAF,
we see
tenemos
people
gente
such
como
as
California
CAF,
Farming, vemos gente de
California
diferentes
Farmlink, from
organizaciones
different
que de alguna manera
organizations
buscan hacer ese trabajo,
that
pero
seek to do
es poco
the
sostenible si
job,
cada
but it's not
organización no tiene los
sustainable if
recursos
each
adecuados para
organization doesn't
poder
have appropriate
responder a la
resources
cantidad de
to be able
agricultores y
to
ganaderos
respond to the
que son
amount of
parte de
farmers
nuestra
and ranchers that are part of our community.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your responses, your sharing of your experiences, and I'm gonna pivot us now to the Q&A portion. So thank you for folks who submitted questions ahead of time. I've got a couple that I'm gonna work through, and we'll see how much time we have to fit all the other questions in. So this first one, Nancy, is for you. What is the future of your farm? Can you share a little bit of the hopes that you have for your business with us?
Sí, claro que sí. El futuro para
Of
mi
course,
agricultura,
the
pues,
future
como
of
les
my farm,
estamos cosechando tarde
like I
por los
mentioned, we
cambios
started
climáticos, pero
harvesting
yo no
late
pierdo la
because
fe
of
y la
climate change,
esperanza de
but
que
I don't
podamos
lose my
seguir
faith and
trabajando
my
en
hope
eso. Como les
that we'll
digo,
be
yo tengo
able
un
to keep
sueño,
working.
quiero cumplir
I
ese
have a
sueño de tener
dream.
mi propia
I want to achieve my dream of buying my own home. I know I can do it. My dreams are very big. I started with 4 beds of strawberries. Then we grew to 2 acres, then 4, then 8. Currently, we have 18 acres. I love what I do. I love what my husband does. We love farming. We are okay with the support of KTA. We are getting grants. We're getting support with the support of the community. We are a little behind financially, but I know things will not be like this forever. I know that working hard will make it. I see myself in the future growing bigger amounts. A farmer is so important for the community because we're producing food. I have big dreams. I want to have a future where I harvest maybe huge amounts of beets, of vegetables. I love what I do. And I want to teach this to my children as well, so they can follow our steps. Just like my parents shared their love for farming with me, I want to share this with my children. So at the end of the day, they are our future. I want them to keep growing just with the same amount of love that we do. The future for my business, I think, is big. I like to have big dreams. I think that working and with faith will get there. I'm infinitely thankful to the support that I've gotten from KTA, the community, and other organizations that I wasn't even aware existed because I was so focused on growing and selling to be able to support my family. I realized that I'm not by myself. There's plenty of organizations that the community is there to support us, and that's been a great blessing for us. So like I said, I like to have big dreams. I see a promising future, and I won't stop. Not because I'm facing obstacles, I'll stop. I want to share this love with my children and keep growing products.
Thank you, Nancy. I think you gained some champions on this call today. You know, we'll all really be cheering you on and hope to see you at the markets. And this next question maybe for Laura and Tania, whoever wants to take it first. What is the future of farming in California, given changing climate and all that's ahead? What is that future going to look like?
Puede ser doloroso responder a ese.
Exacto.
It could be painful to answer that question. Throughout the state, the issues are different. And the Central Valley, things are different than at the coast, at the north. I focus in the Central Coast region, and we have little access to surface water. Our water is usually underground water, and it's very limited. And we keep losing the resource. And we are focusing a lot on water conservation. And if we don't have enough water, we won't be able to keep using the resource. We are facing this in many different states as farmers. We need to have access to the resources. I hope that the future of farming in California, in our region, will be of more cooperation, diversification of farm businesses, rather than just getting bigger and trying to get more and more powerful.
Yeah,
In my
también,
opinion,
el tema de
the issue
qué tan
of
riesgosa esta
how
actividad se está
risky
volviendo,
this activity
qué
is
tan
becoming,
riesgoso económicamente esta
how
actividad es.
risky
Si ya de por sí la
financially it
agricultura, ¿no es
is.
cierto? Nosotros
Farming
sabemos
in
cuáles son
itself
todos los
is
factores que la
a
hacen
risk.
riesgosa.
There's so many
Entender
factors
ahora,
that
cada
make
año
it
el invierno
risk, but understanding that each year during the winter, you can have a storm that can take your whole farm or flood your land.
Es difícil, ¿no?
It's very
realmente
difficult.
mucho para los agricultores pensarlo y
It's
procesarlo.
hard for
Al
farmers
mismo
to
tiempo,
think
pensar
about
en
it
la
and
ingente
process it
cantidad
and
de
think about the
plátanos
fact that you
vivos,
have to change your
el
crop
brote de
plan
arcillas,
because
de
the corn that you
brócolis
used to grow,
crecidas,
the
se
broccolini that
está
you used
o
to
no está
grow
floreando a tiempo
is
o está
either not
floreando demasiado
being
rápido
ready on
por
time or
el
it's
incremento súbito de las temperaturas.
flowering too soon because of high
Entender eso,
temperatures.
tienes que empezar
And
a
understanding
encontrar
that
nuevos
you need to
mercados y
find
qué tan
new
difícil es
markets
acceder
and
a estos
how
nuevos
hard it
mercados,
is to have access
pues
to
te da
those
una idea
markets.
de qué tan
It gives you an
compleja
idea of
y
how
complicada la situación se
complex,
vuelve
how
para
complicated the
muchos de los
situation becomes
agricultores
for
familiares
many of the
a quienes
small
nosotros
family
apoyamos.
farmers that we support.
No voy a hablar de la agricultura
I won't talk
a
about
gran escala porque obviamente
farming at a greater scale
¿no? Que no es
because
cierto.
it's a different monster.
Y de repente por el capital que tienen
And the
disponible,
capital that they have
infraestructura que tienen
available and
disponible,
the amount of
formas,
land that they have available.
estrategias en cómo
They have
mitigar
ways
ese
or
impacto.
strategies to
No digo que no van a
mitigate
haber
the
resultados,
impact.
pero
I'm
la
not saying that they
capacidad
won't
de
suffer
mitigación es mucho
from it,
mayor
but their
que las
mitigation
pequeños
capacity
agricultores
is
familiares
much,
como
much
Nancy,
higher than small family farmers
pero
such
yo
as
creo que
Nancy.
si no nos
I
ponemos
believe that
nosotros a
if we
trabajar por
don't
inyectar
start
capital a
working
través
on
de
injecting
préstamos,
capital through
que no
loans
sean extractivos, ¿no es
that
cierto?
are
Que no
not
busquen
predatory, that are not
sacar ganancia de esos préstamos, sino que
trying to
sean
take advantage of lending
préstamos
the money,
regenerativos,
that
de alguna
they're
manera,
regenerative
cada uno de estos
loans
negocios.
for each one of
Y
those
lo
businesses.
digo no
And I
solamente
say
capital a
it
través de
not
loans,
only
préstamos o a través de becas,
capital through loans, through grants,
y al mismo tiempo,
and
¿no?
at the same time,
Para mí es vital que el
in
gobierno
my
desarrolle más
opinion,
programas
it's
también,
vital to have
no
the
solamente
government
de
develop
acceso
programs,
a
not only
tierra,
when
que
it
lo
comes
estamos
to
viendo
land
en pequeños
access that we have
pilotos
seen,
en
small
diferentes
pilot programs
regiones,
in different
sino
regions,
también
but
de un
also
verdadero trabajo de acceso a mercados.
a true
Nuestros
work when it
agricultores,
comes
y
to
esto es
market
algo que comparto,
access.
¿no? Cuando empezamos a
This
trabajar
is
este sistema de
something
uno a
that
uno
we
de
share when we start
consultoría,
working in
la
the
principal
one-on-one
problemática es el tema de mercados.
advising.
No
We
podemos
have
acceder a mercados
market
aún.
access. We
Tenemos
can
producto que
access
se
markets.
queda
We have product that
en el field. Tania,
stays in
teníamos
the
un
field.
comprador
Tanya,
programado
we
para haber
had
recibido
a
el brócoli
buyer
para la primera semana de
that we
marzo,
were going
pero
to
cayó una helada
turn in
2
the
semanas
first
atrás
week of
que no
March, but
estaba
then
programado, que
there
normalmente
was
no llega, y
frost
se
that we
acabó.
were not
Y se nos
expecting, or
acabó el
it's usually
brócoli.
not here, and
Ok, o de
I lost my
repente,
broccolini.
y ahora que ya lo
Or
tengo listo,
now that
¿no?
it's
Meses
ready,
después, ya no me lo quieren
let's say it was
comprar porque
delayed.
no
Now
es
they
mi
don't want to
ventana
buy
para
it
entrar.
because that was in
Entonces,
my
¿cómo
window to
hacemos
sell
para
it to them.
realmente
So
crear más
how do we truly
canales de mercadeo
create
para los
more
agricultores
marketing channels
a
for
pequeña escala,
small farmers that are
operaciones
small
familiares, ¿no?
family
Como la de
farmers
Nancy?
with their family operations such as
Sin
Nancy's?
eso, tiene que haber una
Without that,
verdadera
we have to have
transparente
a true
trabajo
and
que venga a
transparent
nivel institucional.
level of work at an institutional
Si no
level.
existe eso,
Without it,
lamentablemente vamos a ver
sadly,
menos
we will be seeing
negocios como el de
less
Nancy,
and less
vamos a ver
businesses
menos
such as
agricultores en los
Nancy's. We'll
farmers
see
markets, vamos a
less
ver
farmers
menos
at
de
the
las
farmers
fresas,
markets. We'll
blueberries,
see
raspberries, blackberries,
less
y
of the
frutas que ustedes ven en los farmers
strawberries,
markets.
blueberries, blackberries
¿Por
that are
qué?
so
Porque nuestros
fresh
pequeños
that we now see
agricultores,
at
que son
farmers
los que
markets because the
alimentan
small
nuestros
farmers that are the
comunidades, que
ones
son los que
feeding the
alimentan nuestras
farmers markets
comunidades,
are the
no
ones
van a
feeding our
poder sobrevivir.
communities won't be
Y eso es
able to
real.
make it.
No quiero
And this
decirlo
is
porque normalmente soy
reality.
una persona
I'm not
positiva,
trying
me
to
gusta
say it
tener
because I'm
esperanza
usually a
y digo
very
sí, todo va a
positive
salir
person
bien,
and I say
pero
everything is going to
lamentablemente todos
be
tenemos que
fine,
actuar.
but sadly we
Nosotros
all
ahora
need to
como
take
RCD
action.
y la organización
Us
KTA
as
Advisor
KTA
estamos
working with
trabajando a un
RCD
nivel
are
micro, ¿no? Económico, que
working
es
at a
de ayudar y
microeconomic
asistir a cada
level,
uno de los negocios
helping
con los que
and
trabajamos, o agricultores o ganaderos con los que
supporting each one
trabajamos.
of the farmers or
Pero debe
ranchers that we
existir
work with.
también un esfuerzo
But
a nivel
there should be
institucional
a
para que
institutional
exista
effort
ese cambio que queremos
so
ver, ese
that that
apoyo que queremos
change
ver.
takes place,
Porque
that
si no lo
support that
hay,
we need, because
lamentablemente,
without it,
pues vamos a ver menos negocios
we'll see less
todavía
and less
funcionando, ¿no? O activos, vivos
businesses making
en
it
nuestro
or
comunidad.
alive in our community.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. My thought to close us was to ask you all for a call to action for folks that we have on the call. Tanya, you gave one. I wanted to make a little bit of space for Laura or even Nancy. You know, we have folks on the call who are consumers for sure, folks who are also working at other agencies that we partner closely with that are also working to support farmers. Any kind of final words to the folks who are with us today and how they fit into this picture for building a more resilient future?
Muy probablemente los participantes aquí hoy ya están comprando de.
Probably those that are here already, they are buying from small farmers at the local level. They know where their food comes from. But we need to make sure that you're paying attention to politics and policy around farming, conservation programs at a larger scale, making sure that you are pushing the politicians to make sure that there is programs that protect farm fields, that protect natural resources, that provide the funds for conservation programs. To make sure that organic farming continues and to maintain the cycles of natural resources, acting in a civic way.
Sí, sí, claro que sí. Los invito yo también a
My invitation to you will be to go to farmers markets, to support with your grain of sand, with your support. This past few weeks that's been very hot. A lot of people didn't make it to the farmers market precisely because it was so hot. So our sales are less. It's hard for us to maintain economic stability because this last year we have sold less of what we usually sell. That capital didn't make it to my pockets. So it creates a lack of balance for my family, for my payments, my insurance, the salary for my employees. So I invite you to come and support us at farmers markets. There's plenty of options of places where you can go. Maybe at Walmart, there's AC, you won't be hot, but if you come to the farmers market, the product is fresh, it's of great quality, it will last a long time. I invite you to come and support us. Also, sorry, I say this again, but creating scholarships, loans, capital access is difficult. It's hard to continue, to keep growing, to keep planting. Everything means an expense. So my invitation would be to support small farmers so we can continue and achieve our dreams and keep bringing good quality products to the market.
Yes. Thank you all so much. Thank you for taking the time to share with us and be in conversation today. I'm going to close us out as we're approaching the final 2 minutes of our webinar. We really hope that this space has provided an opportunity for deeper learning, has served to remind us all of the shared work to be done both now and into the future to really safeguard a livable and resilient climate. We've got some links up for you to continue the conversation. So you can dig deeper into those resources there. We also have registration open for the upcoming next webinar series, which will be in August. We'll be sharing these resources out again. So if you're not already connected to us through our newsletter or on our social media, those are great places to stay in touch with KTA and get connected to our clients. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you everyone for spending your lunch hour with us today. That is a wrap for the webinar. So thank you all and hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.